Hello students, Assalamu alaikum. Today I am going to teach you the first chapter of your biology, that is the cell, the fundamental unit of life. This is the first unit in your biology textbook. In this chapter, I will try to make you understand what is a cell and why cell is called as the fundamental unit of life. Cell. What is a cell? As you know, all the living organisms, they are made up of certain basic units. These basic units, which are the structural units and the functional units, these structural, basic units and functional units, these are called as cells. And why this cell is called as fundamental unit of life, in this chapter further we will try to understand this. Firstly, we will understand what is a cell and why it is called as cell. The living organisms which include the microbes, which include the plants and animals. Microbes, plants and animals, these are the living organisms. Microbes, plants and animals, they live on this planet Earth. Due to this, by the presence of these microbes, plants and animals, our planet Earth, it is called as the living planet. So Earth is called as living planet because of the presence of the living organisms like the microbes, plants and animals. The microbes, they include the bacteria, the fungi, the viruses and algae. So collectively, bacteria, fungi, viruses and algae, they are included in microbes. Microbes, plants and animals, they live, they reside on the planet Earth, and so the presence of these living organisms, they make this planet a living planet. All these living organisms, they perform certain basic functions which are called as the functions of life. So living organisms, they are called living organisms because they perform certain basic activities which are called as activities of life or the functions of life. What are these basic functions or activities which make these organisms the living organisms? Number first is they perform the nutrition. Number second is they perform the respiration. Number third, they perform the circulation. Fourth one, reproduction. Fifth one, control and coordination. Sixth one, excretion. So living organisms are called living organisms because they perform these basic functions: nutrition, respiration, circulation, reproduction, control and coordination and excretion. The performance of these living organisms, they make these living organisms the living. So they are called the functions of life or the activities of life. For performing these different activities of life, the living organisms, they have different strategies, different parts of the body. The higher animals, which are made up of more than one cell, like the human beings, the cows, goats, they are made up of various types of cells. So, for performing these activities, they have the different parts or organs for performing these. But the lower organisms, like the bacteria, fungi, which are made up of only one cell, they have, for performing these activities of life, they have got the different cell parts. The cells, these small cells, they have different parts which are responsible for the performance of these activities of life. Now, this was a general introduction regarding living organisms, why they are called living organisms. Our today's topic is what is cell and how it is called as fundamental unit of life. Before the discovery of the microscope, the scientists and we people, we considered living organisms only plants and animals. The plants and animals, because they are visible to naked eyes, they only were termed as the living organisms. But with the discovery of microscope, a new world called as the microbial world, it came into existence. So this opened a new field for the biologists to understand the basic structure of all the living organisms. And according to scientists, the living organisms, they are made up of certain basic units. These small basic units or structural units, they were called as cells. Why they were called as cells? A scientist, his name was Robert Hooke. Robert Hooke was a scientist. What he did, he took the cork. Cork is basically made from the bark of the tree. Robert Hooke took the cork and he made thin slices of this cork. Robert Hooke made thin slices of the cork. The cork is basically made from the bark of the tree. And he visualized these thin slices of cork under microscope. When Robert Hooke visualized the thin slices of cork under microscope, what he found? Suppose this is the magnified image of the thin slices, which Robert Hooke visualized under microscope. He visualized that when Robert Hooke visualized the cork under microscope, he found the structures like these. These structures, when we look at these structures, we see that these structures, they resemble the hexagon. These hexagonal structures, they are basically exactly, their structure is like that of the honeycomb. Honeycomb. The honeycomb is basically the house of the honeybees, the house in which the honeybees live. Its structure is exactly like this. So these honeycombs, their house, it resembles these basic structures which were visualized by Robert Hooke. So Robert Hooke, he named these structures as cells. Cell is a Latin word which means a small room. Small room. So cell means the small room. So according to Robert Hooke, this this cork, which is basically the bark of the tree, it is made up of small rooms. These small rooms in Latin, they are called as cells. So in other words, we can say that this rubber cork, it is made up of cells. And this cork, it was basically from the tree. That means the tree, bark of the tree, it is made up of cells. So the cell, it got its name. And the scientists, they concluded that the plants, which are the living organisms, they are made up of small units which were called as cells, and cell means the small room. But all this, the visualization and the discovery of the cell, this was due to the discovery of microscope. So the discovery of the cell, it was possible due to the discovery of microscope. So here briefly I will try to make you understand what is a microscope. Microscope, basically it is an optical device which is used to see small objects. That cannot be seen by naked eye. So microscope, it is an optical device which is used to see small objects that cannot be seen by naked eye. But the question is, how does the microscope, what is the mechanism, and how does the microscope make us visualize, make us see this extremely small objects which we cannot see by naked eyes? Basically it is due to the presence of lenses. The microscope, it contains the lens. Basically not the lens, the combination of the lens. Lens is a piece of glass which has the curved surfaces. So when these lenses, they are installed in the microscope in combination, it increases the size of the objects to hundreds folds, million folds, thousands of folds. So by the presence of the lenses, the size of the object increases, and in this way we can see extremely small objects by the help of the microscope. So by the discovery of the microscope, it was possible that we can see extremely small objects. So Robert Hooke, he took this opportunity to discover the cell. So cell was discovered by Robert Hooke by the help of microscope when he visualized rubber cork, the cork under microscope. After that, the scientists, they visualized certain tissues of animals like the skin of animals, the human beings. When they visualized the skin under the microscope, they saw that the skin, which is the tissue, it is also made up of these small basic structures which were named as cells. So after performing these different experiments, it was concluded that all the living organisms, they are made up of certain basic units. These basic units, they combine together and make up the whole organism. Like when we look at the building, the huge building, it is made up of the small building blocks like the bricks, the cement, etc. So these bricks, these are the building blocks of the huge buildings. In the same way, the cells, these are the building blocks or basic units of all the living organisms. And why this cell is called as fundamental unit of life? When we look at the structure of the cell, it has different parts and it can have the individual existence. The cell can have the individual existence. Why? I will give you certain examples. The bacteria, there are certain fungi. These bacteria, they are made up of only one cell. And bacteria, it performs all the activities of life. It is a living organism. So only here, only one cell, it performs all the activities of life, like the reproduction, like the respiration, nutrition, locomotion, etc. So when a single cell performs all the activities of the life, we can say that this cell, single cell, it represents life. It can perform all the activities of the life. So this cell, it is called as fundamental unit of life. So if a question is asked, why is cell called as the fundamental unit of life? We will say because the cell, it represents the life. Cell is the model of the life. It performs all the activities of the life. So we can say that cell is the fundamental unit of life. And all the living organisms, they are made up of the cells. So cell, it is a structural unit. It is the basic functional unit. So this is the fundamental unit of life. But the question is further, how does the cell perform the different activities of life? The higher animals, like we human beings, for performing the activities of life like the respiration, etc., we have different organs. And the cells, these are small entities. How do they perform these complex functions? This we can understand only when we see, when we understand the basic structure of the cell. Here I am making the basic structure of the cell, and it is a typical plant cell. The cell, a plant cell, it has an outermost covering which is called as the cell wall. So plant cells, they have externally a covering, hard covering, which is called as the cell wall. This cell wall is one part. Inside this cell wall, there is another covering, which is called cell membrane. Cell membrane. Cell membrane is the second part of the cell. It is the covering inside the cell wall. Inside this plasma membrane, there is a fluid. This fluid is called cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is the fluid which is present inside the cell. What is the composition of the cytoplasm? What is the composition of cell wall? What is the composition of cell membrane? Further, in this chapter we will try to understand. Here briefly I am giving you the outline of a typical plant cell. So fluid. In the center of this cell, there is an organelle which is called as the nucleus. So this centrally located body which is present inside almost all the cells, this is called nucleus. Inside the nucleus there are these thread-like structures which are called chromosomes. Another part this one this is another part of the cell which we call as mitochondria. This is the mitochondria. Inside the plant cells there is another part which has these coin-like structures. This we call as chloroplast. This is chloroplast. Another cell organelle. This is the vacuole. So these are the ribosomes. This one is endoplasmic reticulum. This is Golgi apparatus. This is the typical structure of a particular plant cell. Now, I cannot show you each and every cell organelle here, but I am giving you an idea what is a cell and how does it look like under the microscope. This is basically the ultrastructure of a plant cell under the electron microscope, because the normal microscopes they cannot show these sort of structures because they are extremely small. Now you see that a typical plant cell or an animal cell, it has different parts. This is nucleus, this is chloroplast, Golgi apparatus, mitochondria, vacuoles, cell walls, cell membranes, and the cytoplasm. These different parts of the cell, these are basically the different parts of the cell. They are called cell organelles. Cell organelles. What are cell organelles? Cell organelles are basically the different parts of the cell which perform a particular function. So these different parts of the cell or the cell organelles, they perform the different function. They are meant for different types of particular type of function. For example, this nucleus, it is called the boss of the cell. It performs the control and coordination. This one, chloroplast, it is meant for the photosynthesis. This one, it is meant for the endoplasmic reticulum. It is meant for the transport and packaging. This vacuole, it is meant for storage. The mitochondria, it is meant for respiration, that is making of energy production. So these different parts of the cell, they perform a particular function, and in this way this whole cell, it is a functional unit because it performs all the living activities, and for performance of these living activities they have different parts. So we can say that the cell, this is the fundamental unit of life because it represents life. It can perform all the activities of the life. So this cell is called as fundamental unit of life. This is enough for today. Next tomorrow inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.